In Search of the Source, Chapter 2, Grubbing It Out. The following afternoon, we arrived at Situ Wopu. That's a concise expression that means the place now deserted where the Situ people once lived. The village of Sete had been leveled in a raid years earlier when the Folopa were still doing these things to each other. Now there wasn't much to show that a village had ever been there. The jungle reclaims everything. In such places, certain of the original plants would still be around, however, and remnants of gardens. That's why they make good hunting grounds. The old gardens attract the animals. Wild pigs will forage around for taro and sweet potatoes still growing. Setu Wopu was the best hunting ground for miles around. Whatever they called it, I was ready for a stop. My feet were ready to get out of my shoes, but sitting back and resting for a while wasn't on the schedule. There was work to be done. Everybody bustled with activity. First, we had to build a shelter. The older men shouted commands to the younger. Go cut poles, get thatch, get leaves, get rocks, get water, get firewood, get bamboo. Some of the men immediately went off hunting. The first day always being the best before the animals became wary of our presence. A few cut down a sago palm and started chipping out the soft core, running water through the pulp, squeezing it out and catching the starch. That would provide the staple for our meals. About dark, it started to rain again, but the shelter was up and everybody moved in. The first afternoon of the hunt had been good, bringing in a couple of wild pigs and a big cassowary bird, a python, a tree kangaroo, and some other small game. The place was wild with chatter. Nobody gets excited like the Folopa, and the noise can be enough to rattle the faint of heart. Amidst the clamor, everybody went about the task of making fires, heating rocks for cooking, and preparing dinner. For me, there was almost too much to take in. The skinning and gutting of the game, the scraping of the bones, the smashing of skulls for immediate consumption of the brains, as these parts do not keep, the hanging of meat in the smoke over the fire to preserve and bring back to the village. Of smells, there was a butcher's shop variety, with fresh intestines, burning hair, smoke, and cooking giblets, not to mention the locker room aroma of our own bodies after the trek. Does that sound pleasant?
No.
Ooh. We were close together. The shelter was without walls, about 30 feet long, the roof just high enough to get under. A pair of logs ran down its length, and between them the fires burned. Men sat on either side, sharing the heat for cooking and for warmth. I sat on some leaves, keeping dry, not saying much, just an occasional question to my neighbor, trying to take it all in. Across the fire from me was Hotair, a short, wiry man with a broad smile and about as tough as they come, with raw strength and a 30-cent trade store knife. He was struggling to disconnect the jaw from the head of a boar, cutting tough sinews, slicing the meat from the bones. Next to him, another hunter, Kima, was singeing hair off what had been a tree kangaroo. Kayame braided some pig intestines to stick into a bamboo tube and cook. During a hunt, they generally eat only the entrails, smoking and saving the rest for the feast back at the village. At my left, Sophia was working on his supper. Out of his string bag, he pulled out a ball-shaped bundle wrapped with leaves, tied together with tiny vines. I'd noticed others with similar leaf packages, filled with what I did not know. This one seemed to be alive with movement inside. When he got it open, I saw it was filled with beetles, about 100 of them, bigger than walnuts, crawling all over each other, hissing, tangling their great pincers and spiny legs. Sophia took one, picked off its legs, and placed it just so in the coals, rolling it from side to side with a stick. Then he did the same with several more. In a few moments they swelled up and popped. Then he took one out, tossing it from hand to hand for a moment, like a hot potato, and then popped it into his mouth and chewed it down. Aware of my gaze and all this, he turned to me, his face about 3 inches from mine, and smiled, his mouth full of beetles and parts showing through his teeth. At that moment, I decided it was time to change my focus and see what was happening on the other side of me. Apusi Ali had a packet too, another mystery-wrapped leaf bag tied in vine. He opened it and spread it out. There, writhing and squirming, was a great pile of brown-headed, 2-inch-long, white sago grubs. Do you know what a grub is?
Yeah.
Like a worm or some kind of segmented creepy crawly. Why, Lord, I thought, of all the places in this shelter, why would I have to be sitting right here between one man eating beetles and the other preparing to dine on grubs? Apusi Ali started scooping the grubs by the handful and funneling them into a bamboo tube, banging it down to pack them in. He plugged the open end with a piece of specially folded banana leaf and placed the tube across the logs to cook. Again, I knew it was time to turn my attention elsewhere. Anywhere. Though I set my gaze at the farthest end of the shelter, with the corner of my eye, I was still aware of Apusi Ali turning his bamboo tube of steaming grubs from side to side. Doing my best to avoid betraying any interest in this at all, I was still aware of his reaching back and tearing off a piece of banana leaf. I looked the other way. Still, I knew it when he laid out the leaf, took the bamboo tube off the fire, opened the top, and plopped the contents out in a great big pile. Then, in spite of my fine performance of treating this activity like it wasn't happening at all, Apusi Ali, with the delight of a child at a birthday party, gingerly lifted the leaf by the corners and placed it squarely down in my lap. Looking at me with a big smile, he said, "Eat them, they're good." Suddenly, the whole shelter became silent. You could have heard a beetle crunch, but even Sophia stopped chewing. The man down the log with the tree kangaroo rolled the carcass off the fire and stared. Hotair held his boar's head in his lap, and they all watched me. I looked down at the pile in my lap and up again. In the half light of the place, all I could see were eyes and gleaming brown faces catching the fire's glow. Finally, as calmly as I could, I said, "I don't know this food. How do you eat it?" "Let me show you," Apusi Ali said. He picked up one of the thick, hot larvae and held it up to his mouth. Feigning to take a few tentative nibbles, he said, "You don't do it like this. That is the wrong way to eat sago grubs." Then, scooping up a great handful, he said, "This is the way to eat them." And he thrust the whole batch into his mouth. He chewed, then he swallowed. As he swallowed, I did too, though my mouth was dry. It was my turn. "Did you eat it with sago?" I asked, stalling as best as I could. Sago is no favorite of mine either. Cooked, it's a rubber, gelatinous mass, like something between tapioca pudding and a sponge. But here, I might just need a sponge. They thought the sago was a good idea. They loved it. I thought of dishes I had recoiled from in childhood. What I wouldn't give for one of those to trade for any of this. Equipped with a bite of sago, I took a handful of the grubs almost like a Pussy Ali had done. Bless you. Inserted them into my mouth and chomped down. As I chewed, everybody watched. I chewed for a long time, mouth closed, expression steady, and finally they began to slip down my throat. As I finished, Hoter leaned across the fire and asked, "Felere, are they good?" I paused, then matched his grin with my own and said, Felerapo. Yes, they're good. With that, everybody burst into great cheers. People were slapping me on the back, waving and affirming emphatically, "Of course they're good. We just wanted you to know they're good." With that came a barrage of offers to taste every delicacy they had. Kayame gave me a piece of braided intestines skewered on a stick. Hoter gave me a bite of boar brains. So pleased they were that I would enjoy their food. They were especially pleased that I would enjoy ofoe, grubs. And of course, I had to eat some more. At one point, genuinely interested, I asked, "What are these things anyway?" For a moment, they looked at me incredulously. Could I be serious? What person in the world would not know what these were? I asked again, and Kima leaned forward and said, Akayoni ofoi karatapo. I only got about half of what he said. I'd heard of afoi. I'd heard ofoi in there, and akao, a word for a large beetle, but the verb he used confused me. Kaatapo was the verb to begin. I knew that, but I had never heard it with the ra in the middle. From other contexts, I knew the ra infix added to the verb to begin must mean cause to begin, but I wasn't sure I had it. Wait a minute, I said. What did you say? It had gone by me so fast it was already blurred. Soke, sitting next to Kima, piped up. Both Kima and Soke were astute with language, and they were always coaching me. Paraphrasing Kima's message for me, Soke pointed to the grubs on my right, then over to the beetles on my left, and said, "When these things fly, they fly as these." I understood that fine. What they were telling me was that the sago grub is the larval stage of this particular beetle. But that's not what Kima said, I protested. I need to hear the exact phrase again. By that time, no one could remember it. It hadn't been that important, but groping back, someone finally got it, and this time I heard the whole thing, good and slow. Akeoni ofoi kaaratapo. These beetles cause the grubs to begin. I must have looked like I was catching on to something significant, as they were all with me now. Tell me more about this word, kaaratapo, I said, and everybody jumped in at once with all sorts of examples. You know, they said, butterflies begin caterpillars. Flies begin maggots. Rhinoceros beetles begin tree bugs. Think they mean like they begin as. When it quieted down a bit, Kima said, "It's like when the world started." "What do you mean?" I asked. "You know," he said, "a long time ago. All this didn't just come up by itself. It had to have a beginning, and somebody began it." I looked at Hapele and Isa, sitting a little way down from where all this was going on, and they too were listening closely. "We've been looking for a word," I said to everyone in general. "On the first day of translation, we got stuck. We were trying to find a word that would describe something like what you're saying here, but we couldn't find it. I think we're close, though. If we took the word for God, koto, I went on, and added ne to indicate that God was the one doing the action, then added ra in the middle of the verb, changing it from to begin to cause to begin, then what you have is this: keke nale, alimo, kotone saro, heyatamo, ka'arelipakelepo. In the beginning, God caused the ground and the sky to come into being. They nodded in unison. Just like that, I asked. I could hardly believe it was falling into place. Just like that, they said. So you understand, he had to spend time with these people to learn not just their language, but particular words. It's like if you were trying to learn a different language, what are some of the things that you would easily talk about? Maybe like you might talk about what you were doing in a day and food and the things around you, the objects like, furniture and rooms in a house and maybe jobs and people and colors. But would you talk about creating something?
No.
No. And so he had to spend a lot of time with these people to begin to have these conversations and understand what words would be used for something like creation, to cause to be. And so here on this hunting trip, he had a breakthrough, a new way of saying something that he didn't know how to do before. Just like that, God created the heavens and the earth. And just like that, he had given us a way to say it. That night, as I lay there again in the close company of the men whom I'd come to serve, I reflected on how all this had come together. Here we were, out on a hunt, miles from anywhere, certainly miles from the Bible house. Here I was in the unlikeliest of places to be doing linguistic work, crammed in a dinner between two men, one eating beetles and the other eating beetle grubs, and across the fire from two of the most linguistically gifted men in the village. And the words I'd been searching from our first attempts at translation were plopped, like the dinner itself, right into my lap. You see, he not only needed to know the words, but he needed to know the grammar, right? And before he came to this village, this language was probably not written. So first, he had to live with the people long enough to learn the language. Mm-hmm. And then he had to write the language, which included figuring out the grammar, how the verbs are used. You think about, how we might change the word early to earlier, right? That means something completely different. And he had to figure out how to do all of that with new words in a new language entirely. And then from that, how to write those words into the Bible in a way that's actually accurate with the way the Bible is meant to be read. That is an incredible amount of work. We had prayed about it that first day. We had needed a specific word, and we had expected the answer to come somehow. I never quite expected it to be like this. But when I thought about it later, I thought, who else? Genesis 1:1 was down. We had the beginning.